Good morning, everyone, and welcome to what is a very different Yom Ha'atzmaut business breakfast. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Louise Jacobs, Chairman of UJIA. As with everything else at the moment, we have replaced our physical event with a virtual alternative. But importantly, our aim remains the same. Our annual Yom Ha'atzmaut business breakfast is one of the many ways UJIA connects our community here in the UK with people and communities in Israel. Even though this year we are physically isolated and in many ways disconnected from friends and family in Israel, it is so important that we do all that we can to keep our lifelong connections strong. Over the past few weeks, UJIA has developed a number of online and virtual initiatives to achieve just this. We have an online Ulpan for kids, an interactive resource for Yom Ha'atzmaut as part of our partnership with PJ Library, and so much more. The business breakfast is a significant part of our philanthropic connection with Israel. With that in mind, you will shortly be hearing an update from Israel about our work at Carmiel Children's Village and the vulnerable children we are supporting through the corona pandemic. I do hope that you will be able to support these children in whatever way you can this morning. Before that, it is my great pleasure to introduce our special guest speaker. One of the advantages of this lockdown is that Israelis who would usually not want to be away from Israel for Yom HaZikaron and Yom Ha'atzmaut are able to be both at home and with us. We are therefore very lucky to have Professor Dan Ariely with us this morning. Dan is a professor of psychology and behavioral economics and is dedicated to answering the questions that help people live more sensible, if not rational lives. Don't we all need that right now? Just before I hand you over to Professor Ariely, please note that today's event is being recorded and is also live on Facebook. Dan, over to you.
So, hello, and good morning to everybody. Happy Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's also my birthday, so happy birthday to me. I wanted to, I have kind of a talk in two stages. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and some of the work we're doing, and then some Corona and some non-Corona things. So first of all is introduction. By now you might have noticed that I have half a beard. And you might have wondered what bet I lost. So I didn't lose a bet. Many years ago, I was badly burned. Most of my body is covered with scarring, including the right side of my face. So I just don't have hair on this side. And I'm telling you this because somebody told me that unless I clear up this half a beard thing early on, people keep on wondering what's the point of that half a beard. So there's no point. That's just how things happen. So I told you I was badly burned many years ago. About 70% of my body was burned. I was in hospital for about 3 years, and I write about behavioral economics and social science, and many of my ideas started from my own injury. Right? So I discovered all kinds of things that I like and didn't like, and then I explored them. And because I write about my injury. I get lots of people with injuries who write me and ask for advice, because you can imagine that when somebody gets badly injured, everything that they lost is very clear, and how to find happiness down the line is not as clear. So one of those email that I got was a guy who said that he was paralyzed from the neck down and he wanted to talk. So I called him at night. His name was Ben. He's a very nice guy, and he jumped to the ocean, broke his neck. He was a PhD student in applied math, and he wrote me a year after his injury happened, when it was clear to him that he was not getting better. And he wanted to talk about life and what to do. And we started talking about all kinds of options. And turns out that Ben hated all these books that says the injury is the best thing that happened to me. I don't know if you know, but there's a genre like this. It's an awful genre, and he hates them and I hated them. So we decided he was going to write a book on What does it really mean to be injured? The complexities and difficulties and pain and so on. And then he was also a student in applied math, and his uncle had a startup, and he was going to try and help them out as well. Okay, so we made plan 1, the book, plan 2, helping the startup. And then he asked me, what do we think about committing suicide? And I told him I'm generally not against that, right? But I said, we just came up with 2 plans. Let's explore how you can find happiness in life and meaning and so on before you give up. And I would check up with him about every week, and he made some progress. He made some progress on the book, and I gave him some feedback, and we worked on it. It was harder for him to work with the startup. You know, somebody who's paralyzed, writing with his eyes on the screen. The way he writes is he moves his eyes to a different location. Then that letter gets written. It takes a really long time, very hard to work at the speed of a startup. And then 4 months later, about 4 months from the time we started, I got a call from his sister that he did take his life. He did commit suicide. It was, of course, very sad and difficult for his family, for everybody. And after that happened, I tried to figure out what is the source of resilience, because lots of people have a hard time and they manage, and some people give up. And what's the difference? So since that time with Ben, I've been going and spending a day with people with very severe injuries and trying to figure out what are some of the secrets for resilience. And I'll tell you just about one, and it's not just because I won't tell you about people with severe injuries, but I think we all need to understand resilience in these days. And that lesson came from a guy called Ryan. And Ryan also was paralyzed from the neck down. He had a bicycle accident. He was a mountain biker. And one of the things that Ryan does is every day he asks his caretaker to lay his clothes on the floor, and he gets down on the floor and he shakes his body into his clothes. He has a stick under his armpit, and he basically tries to manage his body into his clothes. And it takes him about 45 minutes. Now, somebody else could have done it in 5 minutes for him, but it takes 45 minutes, and he times himself. And when he gets better, he celebrates. And when he is not getting better, or it takes him too long, he basically rethinks about his strategy for how he's going to get better at this. And what Ryan basically did was to create a goal. You see, what Ben was doing is looking for the meaning of life and the big purpose in all of this. And that's sometimes tough to do, no matter whether you have an injury or not. And what Ryan instead was doing was trying to have control over his environment. And these Corona days are very, very tough, right? We're all losing some of our control over our lives. We all have anxiety and stress, and we all feel that we don't control what's going on. There's a very famous experiment in psychology on learned helplessness. You have a dog in a cage, and from time to time there's a bell, and a few seconds later, electrical shock. Bell, electrical shock. And there's a second dog in a cage, and that dog doesn't get any bells. It just gets the same shock as the first dog. So both dogs get shocks in the first time, but the first dog gets a notice that it's coming. Think about it. What's the difference in resilience between those 2 dogs? Well, you move them to a new apparatus. It's a room, the partition. And from time to time, there's a light, and a few seconds later, a shock. Now, if the dog stays in their side of the room, the shock comes. And if they jump over a partition, the shock disappears. And the first dog walks around, gets some shocks, explore the environment, trying to figure out what happened. Finally figures out he can jump over and avoid the shock. And from that point on, every time the light comes up, he jumps and avoids the shock. The second dog just lays there whimpering, right? The second dog doesn't think that he has any control over the world. And because of that, is very, very depressed. Also, the second dog has a reduced activity in the natural killer cells in the immune system, and have lots of other negative consequences. And the point of this is to just realize how important control is in our lives, especially in times like this when things are stressful, difficult, complex, and we feel we're not having much control. So we all need to establish something like Ryan did, some kind of goals that are achievable, that are helping us to see progress. And if we could do that, we can do much better. There's another version, by the way, of getting control. It's called shopping therapy. Shopping therapy also gives people a sense of control, but it's just a bit more expensive. So I'm not recommending it to the same degree. So that's the first part of my introduction. And the next part would be more positive and uplifting, I promise. And now let's spend a couple of minutes to listen to the UJIA beneficiary from the Carmel Children Village.
The COVID-19 crisis has not spared Israel. It has relentlessly and without distinction affected the entire country, especially those most in need, those vulnerable. And as the economy, the schools and their support systems shut down, so too the risk to them dramatically intensified. UJ's strong record of support and transformative engagement has continued apace, offering hope, relevance and support, strengthening lives and lifting communities, and in return being inspired and moved by the selfless commitment of our partners serving those most in need. The Carmel Children's Village, home to over 200 at-risk children, did not have the luxury of sending many of them home to their biological families. Cared for by married couples with their own children, they live in 16 residential units called Mishpachtonim. UJ has proudly supported the village for many, many years, positively impacting the lives of the children, their futures, and the phenomenally committed staff who so dedicatedly nurture them. Over 80 children were not able to return to their homes during the crisis, and the village staff remained selflessly in post 24/7 to care for them and to support those children that had returned to their families. The village quickly pivoted itself to the new normal, self-isolating as a community, maintaining a regular routine, distance learning, extracurricular activities, and the necessary support and therapeutic services. Impressively, the village also continued to actively support those children who had returned to their families, in many cases providing financial aid, subsistence parcels, and maintaining regular contact between the social workers, the children, and their parents. UJA has been there every single step of the way, communicating with the village, supporting their staff, and committing additional funds for the purchase of new laptops so that the older children will be able to properly participate in the online learning and prepare for their Bagrut exams. That also a crucial step in helping them break their cycles of despair and poverty. There is still so much to do, both now and in the longer term, yet this crisis has revealed renewed meaning to the Talmudic phrase, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'Zeh, that we are all responsible each for the other. In spite of the monumental challenges our partners have faced, not a single one of them requested material support during this crisis, instead demonstrating empathy and compassion, asking what they could do for us. Their concern for your well-being and the well-being of the entire British community is enormously comforting and inspiring. UJ's commitment, and by extension the communities, to support and engage with Israel is not only alive but more relevant today than ever.
Hello, this is Ila from the Children's Village. Here at the Children's Village, because of the coronavirus, we've been staying in the house with the kids that cannot go home for the past month and a half. And thanks to your donation of the computers, we have been able to let our kids join their classmates and participate in lessons. So thank you, stay home and stay safe from the Children's Village.
Chag HaAtzmaut Sameach.
Okay. I think it's back to me. Yes. Okay, I got this. Okay. So I want to kind of tell you a couple of things about what I'm doing here in Israel. I basically have kind of two lives. I'm a professor at Duke University in North Carolina. I lead a research center called the Center. And in that research center, we mostly study financial decision making. Oh, I was muted. I think now it's okay. And I also have a group here in Israel called Kaima, and we work exclusively with the government. It's a little bit like the behavioral insight team in the UK. Work on behavioral economics with the government, and I just want to tell you about a couple of projects that we're doing, kind of to give you a sense of how we're trying to change behavior. So one of the projects we were given was to try and help more kids, and particularly more girls, to study computer science. Sounds like a reasonable task, and it turns out there's lots of courses that people give. Google does these classes, and Facebook in weeks, and the government too. And it's a class they give kids toward the end of middle school in the hope that more of them will start studying computer science in high school, and then hopefully some of them will become engineers or computer scientists. So they asked us to digitize that course to make it more efficient and so on. I said, fine, but before I digitize it, I want to make sure that it actually works, that course actually gets more kids and particularly more girls to study computer science later on. So we did an experiment. We measured before, we measure after, we measure for the computer science class, we measure for another class. We created on neuroscience, and guess what? This class made no difference for boys, and it made girls less likely to study computer science. That was kind of shocking, right? It's a class that everybody gives. It's supposed to be the hallmark for how to get more kids to study computer science, and we're finding that it does nothing for boys and make it less likely for girls to study computer science. So we decided to test it again, just to be sure that it's actually working this way. Again, the same result. So then we started a detective work. And by the way, you can all think to yourself, like, why is this? Why is a short 6 weeks class on computer science make girls less likely to study computer science? And when I'll tell you the reason, you'll see it's trivial, but it was really tough to figure it out. But eventually we found out that the girls at the end of these 6 weeks know that they can do it. It is called self-efficacy. Their belief in their own ability is going up. They think they can do it. But guess what? They think it's a meaningless thing to do. They think it's a meaningless job. Because the first 6 weeks of computer science, all you learn is to move a turtle on the screen. And at that age, the girl says, what is this? Who wants to do this for a living? The boys don't care. Right? They say, oh my goodness, you get to move a turtle on the screen. That sounds great. But the girls are not that excited with this as a career option. So what we did was we ran around the country and we did films of young people, but particularly young women, who are doing meaningful jobs with computer science and education, computer science and health, computer science and design. And we did something with the Ministry of Education, where all the kids, before they were choosing what they were going to study in high school, had to go through our system. And they had to look at these videos of these young people, particularly young men, doing something meaningful with computer science. And what we did was we increased quite dramatically the number of kids who were studying computer science. We started the test with only 9,000 students. We then moved to the whole class of 90,000 students. But we increased the number of girls who were taking these classes by about 25%, and the number of boys by about 10%. So that's kind of one example of, we take a general problem in society, try to study, try to figure out. Sometimes what we think initially would work doesn't seem to work, and coming up with a solution. Another problem we worked on is what's called no-shows. This is before Corona days. People had make medical appointments, and then sometimes they don't show up. And Kupat Cholim, the biggest HMO in Israel, says, okay, if people forget, let's remind them. So they send them a note 5 days before and 3 days before, please show up, you have an appointment. But still 21% of the people don't show up. So we decided to do something different. And what we did was we decided to add a little bit of motivation in this, right? Instead of just saying, oh, it's probably a memory problem, let's remind people. We said, maybe it needs motivation. So we tried all kinds of motivation. So we said, your doctor, Dr. X, is waiting for you. Or your nurse, Nurse Y, is waiting for you. We said, your family really wants you to be healthy. We said, Kupat Cholim, the HMO, will lose money if you don't show up. We tried all kinds of things. The thing that worked the best was there's another person in the country who could use this appointment if you don't use it, right? And then people either more showed up or canceled. By the way, when people get it, we're perfectly fine if they don't show up and cancel, but we want them to cancel and not show up or show up. By the way, this was very nice, right? It was a little bit sad that people don't care about the HMO losing money, but all of our methods worked, and it was nice that camaraderie is still one of the most important parts, and that knowing that somebody else in the country could use your appointment was the bigger motivator. That reduced the no-show rate from about 21% to about 12%, right? So a big jump in that. And now I'm here basically working only on Corona-related things. We started with how to give instructions to people, right? Imagine you tell people, don't leave home. What exactly does it mean? You can't not leave home. Or if you tell people, leave home, but you can only go to the grocery store, could people go 10 times a day to the grocery store? So we started with thinking about how we give people instructions that are easy to understand and easy to follow, and people know when they follow them or not. We moved to working with the Orthodox community that very much like in the UK have had a challenge of getting to think about how to adhere to the rules. And now we're working with the Arab community. As you know, Ramadan just started. From there, we started working with the education system, right? Teaching from a distance is not easy. And we're trying to figure out what's working and not working and how to do it. Also preparing for next year in case there's going to be split schools, how are we going to do it? We very sadly discovered that the amount of domestic violence has gone up, some toward women, a lot toward kids. And we have a couple of new programs that we're starting to try and decrease it. We did some approaches to try and figure out how to revive the economy, including we did a donation where we asked people to donate much more to charities that need it, and we found some foundation that matched people's donations. We're tracking behavior. We can talk one day at more length about privacy, but we're tracking how people are moving around and creating a sort of competition between different towns and mayors. I get lots of angry mayors who call me that they think they're not getting a good enough score. And finally, we're trying to figure out what is the exit strategy from this. What is a world with Corona? So lots of things to do, right? As a social scientist, lots and lots to do. Let me end with the following. If you think about what has humanity achieved in an amazing way in the last 200-300 years, it's really creating tremendous physical infrastructure, right? If you think about this chair, somebody thought about every element of that chair. If you think about air conditioners, and if you think about planes, and if you think about cars, we basically have taken every little part of our fragile body and we invented technology to help us deal with that, right? And nobody has said, be resistant to cold. We just created clothes and heatings and so on. The reality is that we need the same thing for our minds. In the same way that our bodies are not perfect, our mind is not perfect either. And we need tools. We need tools to help our mind. We need ways to redirect us into making the right choices, prevent us from making bad choices. And that's what I think social science is supposed to help us. And I'm happy that we're moving in that direction. So that's it for me. I wanted to say a very happy Yom Ha'atzmaut to all of us. Complex times, but maybe unlike any other Yom Ha'atzmaut, I think our fragility, but also our dependency on each other is much more clear. And I hope that this would be an important step to coming together in better ways for all of us. So, Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.
Thank you so much, Dan. I'm sure if we were all unmuted, you'd hear a big round of applause and a number of questions. Thank you for joining us this morning. A very close friend of UJA, Ambassador Mark Regev, is a regular attendee at the breakfast. So, in keeping with the tradition of the Ambassador's address, here are a few words from Ambassador Regev.
Shalom and Boker Tov. Every year I join you all on Independence Day, on Yom Ha'atzmaut, to celebrate together Israel's Independence Day. And of course, this year should have been no different. Unfortunately, it is. Because of COVID-19, I can't be with you in the flesh. We can't get together for the wonderful UJA business breakfast, but I can send this message online, and that I'm doing. I wanted to thank each and every one of you for your support for the UJA, which has been there for Israel over the years, over the decades, over the generations. Your support for Israel is greatly appreciated, and you're making a real difference in the life of so many people in Israel, helping to narrow gaps, helping everybody in Israel be part of Israel's story of success. And what a story of success it is. If you think of where we were in May 1948, when David Ben-Gurion declared Israel's independence, and where we are today, where Israel is today as a high-tech superpower, a strong country, an increasingly successful country, a country that has done so much for the benefit of the Jewish people and for humanity. And even today, as the entire planet faces the challenges of COVID-19, it's quite possible that Israel, that has been on the cutting edge of so much scientific development, will be part of the solution to finding answers to the COVID-19 challenges, whether it will be in finding cheaper respirators, quicker ways to test people, or even finding an inoculation that will prevent people catching this terrible disease. I believe it's quite possible that Israel can be part of finding solutions for all of humanity. And you, as part of the UJA, who've been there side by side with Israel over all the years in overcoming all the challenges, you can be proud of that, and you can be proud of that Israel is on the front edge of trying to find solutions to this terrible virus. Thank you all very much. Toda rabah.
Thank you, Ambassador Regev. And may I take this opportunity to thank you all for the support you have given and continue to give to both UJA and to me personally. We are very grateful. That is nearly everything from us. I'd just like to thank everyone who has helped turn today's event from physical to virtual. The Breakfast Committee, particularly the chairs Mark Lester and Natalie Sims in London, and Michelle and Mark Levine in Manchester. And of course, our sponsors, Currency UK, Israel Bonds, LRC, and Acro Nadlan. Of course, we can't end this event without singing the Hatikva. This year, we are singing alone. So to help you out, we've got our friends, family, and beneficiaries from Israel to sing with you. As you will see, we have brought together people from across Israeli society. They have recorded themselves at home on their phones, and we've put them together to bring us all closer to Israel. Please be upstanding and please join in with the Hatikva, alone, but still very much connected with Israel. Thank you.